Hey Grinder, Silvermort here. Another Shai video today. Today we're going to take a look at Shai talents, our skill enhancements, a few tips and tricks, and our skill add-ons. Let's get started with our first tip. Here we're going to take a look at how we can prevent Hop from being overridden by evasion. We talked about this in our first skills video. The easy way to do this is we go in and we can lock evasion. Just left click on the lock after you hover on it. That will prevent you from accidentally managing to evade doing our silly little roll instead of a hop when you intended to do a hop. That's your first tip for the day. Let's get started taking a look at our talents. The first thing we're going to do is review the skill window a little bit, since this has changed significantly with the latest update. So the first couple skills here are default skills within your awakening. Your next four here in this set, these are all your buffs. All right, so these buff you and you buff your group. The next two here are your debuffs. So these are for debuffing either enemy players in PvP or mobs while you're trying to grind. And these last three are your offensive, damage dealing, and CC skills. For some reason, and I don't quite understand this yet, Sun's Fury is showing that there's a stun with this skill. That is incorrect. There is no stun on this skill. Speaking of things messed up in the new UI, there used to be a skill here. It's the first one that was listed in the old panel on how you switch in and out of your awakening or your talent spec here. Well, that's gone now. So let's look at how we do that for folks that haven't done this before. On any class, C will shift you in and out of your awakened, or in the case of the Shai, your talent stance. So simply pressing C will switch those stances for you. Here, press C, I'll be in my talent stance, C again, and I'm out. Now we know how to get into our awakened stance. Let's look at a couple options for getting out of awakened stance. The first option is best used when you're in a tight situation and you need to get back into your regular stance, but you're at risk of taking damage. In this case, we'll want to use tuck and roll, which is forward F, and then hit C as we come out of our roll. Why we do this is tuck and roll will give us super armor, so this gives us some protection while we're trying to switch out of our stance. Let's take a look at what this looks like. WF into C, and we're back to a regular stance. Do that one more time. WF, C, and we're under a regular stance. So as a second option to get out of our awakened stance, we can go straight into an attack. So let's take a look at what we'll do for this. We want to take advantage of twirl. So this is left or right and left mouse button. So we're going to go straight into an attack from our awakened stance. Let's switch into awakening. And then if we do right, left mouse button, straight into attack out of awakening. Again, let's do this the same thing, but left and a mouse button, and right out of our stance. That gives us two options. One is a safety out, and then one is an attack out. So there you go. Now you've got a couple different options for getting out of your awakened stance. With how to get in and out of our awakened stance out of the way, let's go ahead and start taking a look at our talent skills. Our first skill is Do It Better. I'm sure all of you remember that wonderful, annoying little gal in Valia screaming, "Do it better!" all the time. Well, now the skill actually has some use. In this case, this is going to be an attack buff for you and your friends. This replaces your standard E buff when you're not in awakening stance or talent stance. So your E buff by default is a heal. In talent stance, this is an attack buff. So this increases all AP by 30 and special attacks by 5%. This will also give you super armor while you're casting this skill. So let's go ahead and take a look at what this skill looks like. This is just tapping E while you're in your stance. So here we are. That's it. So you can see we now have a 30-second buff. This gives us all AP plus 30 and special attack damage for 5%. Our next talent skill is called Tuning. This skill actually will allow us, as you'll see later, to cancel out of other skills that we're using. Its primary use, however, is to apply some HP and mana / SPWP recovery as well. This will work for you and up to 10 friends around you. Let's take a look at this. This is left mouse button while we're in our awakened stance. I'm going to keep saying awakening through this video. Just remember for the Shai, it's called talent. All right, so go ahead and left mouse button. We'll pull out our little loot here. we'll start playing. You can see the green area around me is the area of effect for this skill. Anyone in that area will start regenerating HP and your resource skill, whatever that is. Now, a second option for getting into tuning is simply standing still. After a couple of seconds, if you're in your talent stance, your Shai will start automatically tuning. Here we go. So I've pressed no keys. She will just do this by default. And she will cycle in and out of this as long as you're inactive in your stance. As soon as you move or try to use any other skill, she will stop tuning. All right, next up, let's start taking a look at our buffs. These are the real bread and butter and the fun part of the Shai for me. We have 4 buffs here. We'll start with the first one here, which is Sun, Moon, and Stars. Sun, Moon, and Stars is our attack buff for you and all your allies. This increases attack speed, casting speed, and movement speed by 10% for 30 seconds. This is on the F key. And like we mentioned earlier, you can use the left mouse button, which would normally be tuning, to cancel out of casting this buff. Go ahead and take a look at what this buff looks like. Here we are. So the radius of this effect will grow the longer you cast your skill. It starts out relatively small, but now you can see we're already at our full radius. Anyone in this area will receive our buff. You notice that each time that pulsed, roughly once every 2 to 3 seconds, it resets the timer on our buff. So this drops a 30-second buff, and each time that pulses out, it will reset that buff timer. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at our next buff skill. Our next buff skill here is Shout to the Sky. Shout to the Sky is a max HP buff, so it's going to increase the maximum amount of HP we can have, and it's also going to heal us at the same time. So this will do 400 HP per tick, and it's going to increase the maximum amount of HP you can have by 700. So this skill will use down and F. Go ahead and take a look at what this looks like. Here we are. And we can see if this drops a 30-second. Here we go, our pulse, so it reset the 30-second timer. All right, let's take a look at our next buff. Our next buff is Time to Shine. Time to Shine is an interesting one. This increases your Black Spirit Rage recovery. That's kind of worded weirdly. What this means is you're going to earn Black Spirit Rage faster, so you can drop your 100 and 200% skills quicker. I don't use this one that often myself. I could see this being far more useful in guild versus guild PvP. If you're running with, let's say, your wizards in your party, this is going to allow them to drop their meteors a lot more frequently. But let's go ahead and take a look at what this looks like. This is on your right mouse button. Here we go. Got our buff here. This buff, unlike the others, you notice this will only last 20 seconds versus the 30 seconds of the others. So you may want to keep that in mind when you're deciding which order to cast your buffs. Okay, now let's take a look at our last buff. Our last buff here is Summer Rain. This increases your resistances. If we take a look at our resistances, 32, 22, 22, 22 across the board here, right? Now let's go look back at our skill. Summer Rain says all debuff resistance plus 20%. So we should see a 20% increase on our character's resistance stats while a buff is active. This is on the down right mouse button. Let's go ahead and fire this off here. Okay, you notice this is another 20-second buff. Let's go ahead and look at our stat panel. You can see it has indeed increased all of our resistances by 20% while this buff is active. Now that we've looked at those buffs, let's talk about some other facts and things that affect these buffs a little bit. So first to note, these buffs can all be seamlessly chained into one another. any awakened Shai skill that uses the same instrument to cast the buff can be chained together. So let's take a look at that. So if we go ahead and let's start off with Sun, Moon, and Stars. I can go straight to Shout. Into Time to Shine. And then Summer Rain. Now, no, I've only got 3 of the buffs here. I missed Shout to the Sky because I transitioned too quickly between the skills. So you want to make sure that you give yourself plenty of time in casting them, that the buff actually applies to you and those around you before you switch. But I didn't have to stop casting anything to switch those buffs. The second thing to note is that even though each of these buffs say they have 3 levels, you're only allowed to take the 3rd level of one of these skills. So you can use the arrow key here to switch between which level you're looking at. All right, so here we can see we're looking at level 2. This would be level 3, but we're not allowed to take this, right? We can't do this. We're only allowed to take 1. Unfortunately, with the UI update, it does a really bad job of showing that that's the case, but you're only allowed to take 1 of these 3rd levels of the buffs. So choose which one you think is going to be most effective for you. I took Sun, Moon, and Stars. I find this very helpful for grinding. Obviously, it also has great help in group PvP. A second thing to note is that your soul has a great impact on some of your buffs. So if you look at your soul, I'm fortunate enough to have gotten mine to pen. So your percentage values on your soul will be different than mine until you reach your pen state. If we look at this, however, we can see that Sun, Moon, and Stars listed on the bottom here is plus 15%. So as far as I understand this, this adds an additional 15% of effectiveness on top of the 10% base for this buff. This increases our buff value. We can also see that Misty Haze and Delusive Light, which are 2 debuff skills we haven't looked at yet, those are also get bonuses from our soul. Now, in order to get the larger soul here, you need to complete your Shai Quests. Make sure you do those as soon as possible. They open up at level 56 when your talent's available. Run through them right away so you can get your Artina soul first thing and just focus on leveling that. A second thing while we're talking about the soul, you can only get this soul once. Unlike other classes where you can get duplicates of your awakened weapon to help with repairs while you're enchanting, you cannot do that with your Shai. Your only option to repair this is either A, create another Shai, level it to 56, do the whole quest line to get another soul, or use your memory frags. I myself chose to do the memory frags. I didn't find it that bad. Enchanting on this seemed a little easier than other awakening weapons. Just keep that in mind when you're leveling your soul. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at our debuff skills. First up we have here is Misty Haze. Misty Haze is an invasion and DP debuff. Both of those are debuffed by 10%. It has an accuracy rate of 100%, which means it's always going to land this debuff. This is used on the Q. So let's take a look at what this looks like. Go ahead and tap Q here. Here we have Misty Haze. If we walk over to one of our targets here. So this pulse. All right, so we just saw that go out. Now our target has the little orb going around him. It means he's affected by this debuff. Let's whack him so we can see what's going on here. We can see that he has the movement and DP debuffs on him. Another important thing to note there that we didn't talk about before is that when you're playing your buffs or your debuffs, you can walk around. You're free to keep moving while you're doing that. Take a look at our second debuff. This is Delusive Light. Delusive Light is critical hit rate and movement speed debuff. This critical hit rate debuff is huge. This is a 50% debuff. You're going to notice this when this lands on you. This is on Shift Q. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. All right, so we can see we got the first target pulse. On the next pulse, we should get our second target as well. There we go. As you can see, those are not hit. They both got their little orbs on them. All right, so I'm free to move around here. I can even dash. Keep playing this. All right. So in order to get out of these, left or right mouse button to toss out. So I'm gonna smack this guy. All right, we can see that we do have our debuffs here. Movement speed and critical hit rate are dropped. The debuffs are there. Okay, so now let's take a look at our offensive abilities. We have 3 of these here on the Shai. We have Forest Echo, Sun's Fury, and Earth's Tremble. Let's go ahead and start with Forest Echo. Forest Echo will cast by pressing Shift F. This is a fun attack. This is going to pull out all your little fairy friends to do some attacks. The interesting one about this skill is that you can sustain this by holding the F key for as long as you have stamina available. So this is going to burn stamina. It's going to take an initial 100 stamina to cast it, and then it will slowly drain as long as you're holding the F key. This is also quite a big area of effect, and it does quite a decent amount of damage. Let's go ahead and take a look at what this looks like. So Shift F. Now I'm going to hold down F here. I'm going to keep dropping our attack. Now, as soon as I let go of F, we can see the stamina drain here. As soon as I stop holding F, our skill's going to stop. Now, there's really not any cooldown on this. I can hit Shift F again, right back into it, as long as I have the stamina to cast. Now, I'm not going to hold F this time. So that's your default length of your skill there. All right, Sun's Fury is another attack. This one, however, has some debuffs attached to it as well, which is great. So this would be you could count this as a 3rd debuff skill. So this has got, again, a nice damage hit on it. This is attack speed, casting speed, and movement speed debuff by 20%. So it's going to reduce their abilities by 20%. Unlike Forest Echo, you cannot sustain this. You can't keep it going. This is going to use MP instead of stamina. And this only hits in a cone in front of you. So this is a frontal attack. This isn't an AoE like Forest Echo was. This is on Shift right mouse button. All right, so let's take a look at what this looks like. Basically, we're going to become a flamethrower here. All right, and we can see that we've landed these 3 debuffs, and we've done a bit of damage there. All right, so let's take a look at our last defensive skill, which is probably our best and one of the reasons that we'll be pulled into PvP frequently, aside from our buffs and debuffs here. This thing is massive. This is a drop damage. Again, this is in a forward only, so just like Sun's Fury, only attacking in front of us. Earth's Tremble does the same. The difference here, though, is this doesn't have any debuffs. This does some damage, but the big thing here is this has a stun, and this is a group stun. This will stun up to 10 targets in front of you. This is massive in group PvP. So use Shift left mouse button to do this. Let's go ahead and take a look at what this looks like. Shift left mouse button. And we can see our target has little swirly effects and is stunned. That's a fairly short duration stun, but if your team or your group is on the ball, you can take advantage of that and completely annihilate some folks. So let's go ahead and take a look at my skill add-ons. My skill add-ons, I think, are a bit of a matter of personal opinion. So don't take these as the, quote unquote gospel truth of skill add-ons. Play around with them, find out what works for you. For me on Twirl, I have attack against monsters and HP recovery. On 1, 2, 3, I have a bleed, pain effect, right? It's a dot, and HP recovery. So between these two, my HP rarely drops while I'm out grinding. If it does, we've always got our other 2 heals if we need that. And then on Eat This, as you guys already saw in my Eat This tips, we have burn and bleeding damage. So play around with these, figure out what works best for you. These are the skill add-ons that I use. Next, I'd like to take a look at a couple tips or lesser known things potentially about the Shai that just might help you out or give you something fun to do with your Shai. First up, we have when you're mounting a donkey or horse with your Shai, you may sometimes notice there's a little bit of a funny delay when you're trying to first mount your horse or donkey. A way to avoid this, I found, is if you hold down the forward key, in this case W, while you're mounting, right? Hold that down. You'll skip the oddity that occurs sometimes trying to get in there. So next up, we have a Shai only recipe that works with simple alchemy that I haven't seen any other Shais use, and I don't know that most Shais know it exists. Now, this is more of a fun little thing than it is a staple that you're going to use continually, but it is nice to know that you can do this. So if we open up crafting by hitting L, I'm going to go to simple alchemy. We're going to toss in 5 timber, any timber, even including logs. Don't use logs, they're too valuable. Any timber will work here. 5 powder of flame. Now, I've got thousands of this in stockpile. I'm sure you do too. And 5 rough stone. We'll go ahead and start this up. How shaking this together makes anything, is beyond me, but we'll go for game logic here. All right, so what that created for us is this here, a bonfire tool. The bonfire tool has a couple nice properties to it. First, every 10 seconds, you're gonna get an HP recovery, 25, so it's gonna heal you for 25 points every 10 seconds. And it cures hypothermia. So if you're out in the desert doing some muddy water gathering at night and hypothermia is picked in, just drop a bonfire. You'll be fine. Now this will last for 10 minutes and it's a 30-minute cooldown. Let's just go ahead and put this down and see what it looks like. There we have it. Our little bonfire. We're gonna warm up next to the fire. We're gonna rub our stick together to make fire. And there we go. That's it for today's video, grinders. I hope you found it helpful. Let us know what other kind of videos you'd like to see in the comments, and happy grinding!